In a vast, sparkling chamber aboard the Council's flagship, representatives from all over the galaxy gathered. Alien species of every shape, size, and color were present, their minds all fixed on one subject: humanity. This newly discovered race was unlike anything the galaxy had encountered before. Their species, young compared to the ancient civilizations of the galaxy, had only recently begun to explore the stars. And yet, what caught the attention of the Intergalactic Council wasn't just their curiosity or their rapid technological advancements. It was something far more unusual. The humans had an odd reputation, one that made the Council uneasy. How could they be so defiant? A reptilian species member, known for its patience and calculated demeanor, hissed. "They've never even encountered the power we possess, yet they resist any kind of negotiation or submission." Another voice, an insectoid diplomat, clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. "It's true. I've read reports of their encounters with superior forces. They don't surrender. It's as though they don't understand the concept of defeat." Across the room, a tall, armored figure raised its hand, a being from an ancient warrior race. "Perhaps they simply haven't realized their place in the galaxy," it said with a confident tone. "After all, they're a primitive species. They don't understand the power we wield. We must show them what happens when they challenge us." The room fell silent. The idea of humans challenging their superior forces was absurd, but the reports kept coming. The humans fought fiercely, never once offering to surrender, even when the odds were stacked against them. Their enemies, both alien and human, spoke of a spirit that couldn't be crushed. The Council's curiosity turned into concern. They couldn't ignore the fact that humans had somehow managed to survive against powerful invaders and thrived even in the most hostile conditions. While other species might bow to overwhelming force, humans simply refused to. This wasn't normal behavior. There had to be a deeper reason. The question was no longer about whether humans could be defeated. They needed to know why they fought so hard, why they refused to submit. "Let us test them," the armored figure suggested with a sneer. "We will send a small force to make contact. Show them their place in the galaxy." The reptilian diplomat nodded, but with hesitation. "And if they resist, what then?" The warrior's gaze darkened. "Then we'll show them that they have no choice but to surrender. They will learn that there are forces beyond their understanding." The insectoid diplomat's clicking grew louder. "And if they don't surrender? If they fight back with this spirit that they are rumored to have?" The room quieted. The idea of a species that didn't accept defeat, that didn't understand when they were beaten, was an unknown to the Council. For millennia, the galaxy had been controlled by those who were wise enough to surrender when necessary. Humanity's refusal to submit could shake the very foundations of galactic diplomacy. "We'll find out soon enough," the armored figure said, the finality in their voice cutting through the tension. "The humans are about to learn that in this galaxy, resistance is futile." The Council's decision was made. The time had come to see if humanity's refusal to surrender was a strength or a foolish weakness. The galaxy's future would depend on the answer. And the Council was about to test it in the most direct way possible. The sun blazed over the distant human colony, a tiny speck of life on a barren planet, far from the bustling centers of the galaxy. This was the perfect place for the Intergalactic Council to make its first move. The colony had little defense, just a small military force and civilians, some of whom had never even seen an alien before. It seemed the perfect opportunity to test humanity's reputation for defiance. The Council had sent a powerful fleet, led by the experienced alien commander, Orcs, a creature of immense size and strength. Orcs was known for crushing weaker enemies with ease. His fleet was armed with the latest technology, capable of wiping out entire planets with a single command. He had no doubt the humans would surrender as soon as they saw the sheer power of his fleet. As the fleet arrived at the edge of the human colony's orbit, the sight was breathtaking. Massive ships, adorned with the insignia of the Intergalactic Council, hovered in space, blocking out the stars. The humans had no idea what was coming. Vrox looked over at his officers, his confidence unwavering. "Prepare to land," he ordered, his voice deep and commanding. "We'll show them how we deal with those who refuse to yield." The first wave of ships touched down on the colony, and the alien soldiers swiftly exited. They were met by the sight of human soldiers, a group of ragtag defenders who had already positioned themselves in an attempt to protect their people. These humans were not trained warriors. They were civilians turned soldiers. But what they lacked in skill, they made up for in determination. Vrox watched from his ship as the human soldiers fired their weapons. The blasts were weak, ineffective against the advanced alien armor. The humans were clearly outmatched, but that didn't stop them. They fought with a kind of desperation that puzzled Vrox. Normally, in such a situation, an enemy would quickly surrender or retreat. But these humans fought back with everything they had, charging forward as though they had nothing to lose. Vrox frowned. "Are they insane?" he muttered to himself. His fleet's advanced weaponry made their assault look like a slaughter, yet the humans refused to retreat. The battle raged on for hours, with the human soldiers constantly regrouping, no matter how many were knocked down. Vrox's forces advanced, but there was something in the human soldiers' eyes that caught his attention. A fire, a resilience that no one had expected. The Intergalactic Council's fleet had successfully taken control of the human colony, but the true test was just beginning. Commander Vrox, still shaken by the humans' unyielding resistance, ordered that a group of human prisoners be brought aboard his flagship for interrogation. His mission was clear: find out why the humans had fought so fiercely, even in the face of overwhelming odds. He couldn't understand it. No other species had ever reacted this way. The prisoners were lined up in a cold, metallic room aboard the alien ship. They were exhausted and wounded, their clothes torn, their faces covered in grime. Vrox stood in front of them, towering over them with his massive frame, his eyes scanning each human carefully. He had seen many species before, but the humans were different. They didn't seem afraid, not in the way he expected. One by one, the prisoners were brought forward. The first was a middle-aged man, his hands bound tightly. Vrox's translator device cracked to life, and the cold, mechanical voice filled the room. "Why didn't you surrender? You knew you could not win." The man's eyes were tired, but his voice was firm. "We don't give up. We don't surrender. It's not who we are." Vrox's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Explain." The man looked at him with a steady gaze. "We're humans. We don't know how to quit. Even if the odds are against us, we keep fighting. Because if we stop, if we surrender, that's the end for us. Our people have been through wars, disasters, and hardship. We've survived because we never give up." Vrox stared at the man, his mind racing. "But you were outnumbered, outgunned. You had no chance." The man smiled weakly. "Maybe. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that we fought, and we'll keep fighting." The commander moved on to the next prisoner, a young woman, clearly shaken by the ordeal, but still standing tall. Vrox asked the same question, expecting another simple answer, but the woman's response was different. "We're not like you," she said quietly. "We don't think of surrender as a choice. It's not in our blood. We fight for each other, for our families, for our future." Vrox's mind began to whirl. This was something he had never encountered before. The humans' refusal to surrender wasn't just a tactical choice. It was a core part of their identity. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about survival. For the first time, Vrox began to feel a strange sense of respect for these humans. They were not cowards, nor were they foolish. They fought because it was in their nature to do so. They believed, deep in their bones, that as long as they were alive, they could change the outcome. He walked back to the control panel, his thoughts swirling. How could any species with such a spirit be controlled? How could the Council possibly manage to break their will? As the interrogation continued, Vrox began to see the full picture. The humans might have been outmatched in terms of technology and numbers, but they were far from helpless. They had something far more dangerous, something the Council had overlooked: an unbreakable will to survive. It was a force that couldn't be crushed by weapons or tactics. Vrox couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would the humans submit? Or would they, in the end, rise again, as they always had? Let me know if you'd like any changes or further adjustments. After the interrogation, Commander Vrox felt the weight of the humans' resilience pressing down on him. The questions that had lingered in his mind since the battle began were still unanswered. What was it about humans that made them fight without fear of defeat? He knew that a direct approach would be needed now, something more than force. He needed to understand the humans, to get them to see reason. He had already begun to question the assumptions of the Intergalactic Council. If the humans truly couldn't be defeated by mere force, then perhaps there was another way. Perhaps a more diplomatic approach would work. Vrox was tasked with bringing the human race into the fold of galactic power, but he had no idea how to do so when they refused to bend. The human ambassador was brought aboard Vrox's ship under heavy guard. She was one of the highest-ranking members of the human government, a woman who had helped lead her people through the chaos of the war. She entered the room, her posture straight, her eyes clear and defiant. Vrox noticed that she wasn't afraid, and her face was a mask of calm determination. "Human," Vrox began, his voice deep and firm. "You've seen the power of the Intergalactic Council. You've seen our forces. You've seen what happens when a species defies us. Yet you resist. Why?" The ambassador stood silently for a moment, her gaze unwavering. Finally, she spoke. "We don't surrender because we know what's at stake. We know what happens when we stop fighting. You think you can break us, but that's not how humans work. You can kill us. You can conquer us, but you'll never make us give up." Vrox studied her closely, trying to read her every word. "You've already lost. Your people are scattered, your cities destroyed. There's no way for you to win." Her lips curved into a slight smile, and she took a step forward. "Maybe you're right, but even if we're broken, even if we're defeated, we'll always fight back. That's what we are. You'll never make us forget that. You'll never make us surrender." Her words were like a punch to the gut. Vrox had expected her to plead for mercy or offer some kind of compromise, but she didn't. Instead, she made it clear that the human spirit could not be crushed by force or fear. Vrox's thoughts swirled as he tried to process what he was hearing. He had been raised to believe that every species had a breaking point, that all beings could be made to submit with the right pressure. But the humans, these fragile, small creatures, seemed to be beyond that. "The Council expects you to submit to our authority," Vrox continued, his voice steady but tinged with a hint of frustration. "We have a long history of peaceful coexistence with other species. You are new to this galaxy, and you do not understand the rules. We could destroy your planet. We could wipe your species from existence." The ambassador didn't flinch. "And yet you still haven't, because you know something, don't you? You know that we won't stop. You know that if you try, you'll make us fight harder. That's what makes us dangerous." The words hung in the air, and Vrox couldn't shake the feeling that the humans were right. He had underestimated them. But now, more than ever, he realized that if the Council wanted to bring humanity into the fold, they would need to do more than just threaten. They would have to understand this strange, stubborn species and find a way to coexist with them, on their terms. For the first time, Vrox doubted whether the Council's methods could succeed. The galaxy had always been about power. But these humans, these remarkable, stubborn humans, had something else entirely. As the days passed, Commander Vrox's mind became more consumed by the humans. The more he observed them, the more he realized that their defiance wasn't born out of foolishness. It was a part of their very being. The resistance that they had shown during the battle and the interrogation wasn't just a temporary reaction. It was a way of life for them. While the Intergalactic Council had expected their advanced technology and overwhelming military force To force the humans into submission, something unexpected began to happen. Instead of collapsing under the pressure, the humans were adapting. Their strength didn't come from their weapons or their numbers. It came from their ability to evolve, to think in ways their enemies couldn't anticipate. News spread quickly through the galaxy about the humans' unyielding spirit. The Council's decision to test humanity had backfired. Other species, watching from afar, began to take notice. The idea of a species that refused to submit was both fascinating and terrifying. Many had underestimated the humans, thinking them to be primitive and weak, but now the galaxy was starting to see them differently. Vrox sat in his quarters, staring out at the stars. He had been a warrior all his life, trained to conquer, to crush any enemy that stood in his way. But these humans, they were different. They weren't afraid of defeat, and that made them unpredictable. That was dangerous. Meanwhile, on the human side, their leaders were quietly working to rally their people. The humans may have lost the battle, but their spirit was far from broken. As their military regrouped and strengthened their ranks, a rebellion began to form. It wasn't an army of weapons or advanced technology. It was a rebellion of will. The humans, now fully aware of the power they were up against, realized that they couldn't win through brute force alone. Instead, they would use their greatest weapon, their resilience. Human leaders spoke of survival and unity, encouraging people from all walks of life to rise up, no matter how small the resistance seemed. Even the civilians, those who had no combat experience, were inspired to help. It wasn't just soldiers that fought for freedom. It was everyone. The rebellion grew, fueled by the unwavering belief that humanity would never surrender. As the human rebellion gathered momentum, Vrox began to see the gravity of the situation. This wasn't about winning or losing a battle anymore. It was about something far larger. The humans were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their very identity. The rebellion was a symbol of everything they stood for: independence, resilience, and defiance. The alien commander knew that the longer the rebellion lasted, the more dangerous it became. The humans were not just resisting. They were inspiring others to join them. There were whispers among some of the alien species, considering whether to stand with the humans, to break free from the oppressive rule of the Council. If the humans could resist, then perhaps others could too. Vrox was no longer sure that his forces would be able to contain the rebellion, especially as human ingenuity continued to surprise him. The humans didn't just fight. They adapted, they learned, they found new ways to surprise their enemies. It was a skill that no other species seemed to possess, and it was becoming clear that this was their true strength. As the rebellion spread, so did the fear among the Intergalactic Council. The humans were not simply refusing to surrender. They were changing the rules of war, and in doing so, they were forcing the galaxy to reconsider everything it had ever known about power. The human rebellion was no longer a small act of resistance. It was a full-scale movement. Despite the overwhelming force of the Intergalactic Council, humans continued to fight, and with each passing day, their numbers grew. What had started as a few brave souls refusing to submit had now become an unstoppable tide of defiance. The rebellion wasn't just about soldiers. It was about every human who had ever believed in the value of freedom, every person who had faced adversity and survived. Commander Vrox had watched as the humans fought back with relentless determination, but he never imagined the depth of their strength. The Council's forces had initially thought they could crush the rebellion within days, but instead it had spread like wildfire. Vrox had underestimated the humans in a way that was becoming painfully obvious. The Council's response was swift. New fleets were sent to crush the rebellion. Massive fleets of alien warships entered human space, aiming to wipe out the last pockets of resistance. Vrox knew that failure was not an option. The Council had made it clear: either the humans would be forced into submission, or they would be destroyed. But there was a problem that Vrox had never expected. The humans didn't break under pressure. They didn't scatter or hide. Instead, they rallied. One day, Vrox was called to the war room, where the battle plan for the final assault was being drawn. His officers stood around the large table, pointing to various locations on the holographic map, preparing for the attack. But Vrox couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting back to the humans. The humans had something that no other species had, a refusal to give in, no matter the odds. They fought not because they thought they would win, but because they couldn't accept losing. It was a force that couldn't be measured by weapons or ships, and that made them dangerous. "I don't understand them," Vrox muttered, staring at the map in front of him. "They should be crushed by now. Why won't they stop?" One of his officers, a veteran of many wars, spoke up. "Because they believe they can win. Even when they're outmatched, even when they know defeat is certain, they fight. They fight because it's in their nature, and that makes them different from any other species we've ever faced." Vrox felt a flicker of doubt. It was strange to hear his own officer admit that the humans weren't just another enemy to be defeated. They were something else entirely. Something that didn't fall under the usual rules of war. "I've never seen anything like it," Vrox said, his voice softer now. "Every time we think we've broken them, they come back stronger. It's like they don't know how to quit." The officer hesitated, then added, "Perhaps we're the ones who've misunderstood them all along. Maybe it's not about winning the war. Maybe it's about showing them something else." Vrox turned sharply to look at his officer. "What do you mean?" The officer glanced down at the map, then back at Vrox. "Perhaps we need to rethink how we approach them. Maybe the solution isn't to crush them with force, but to understand them. To find a way to coexist, not dominate." Vrox stood still for a moment, the weight of the officer's words sinking in. Could the humans really be the key to a new kind of balance in the galaxy? Was there something about their spirit, something that refused to be broken, that the Council had missed? The rebellion was not just a war for the humans. It was a war for their way of life, their identity. And as the galaxy watched, Vrox knew that the outcome of this conflict would reshape everything. But the question remained, would the Council learn from the humans, or would they destroy them to maintain control? The answer was not yet clear. But one thing was certain, the humans were not going to give up. And that made all the difference. The rebellion was spreading faster than Vrox or anyone in the Intergalactic Council could have anticipated. What had started as small, scattered pockets of resistance on distant human colonies had now become a movement that threatened to engulf the galaxy. The humans, despite the overwhelming force of the Council, had refused to back down. They were not only fighting for their survival, they were fighting for their very identity. But there was something even more unexpected happening in the shadows of this rebellion. As the human resistance grew, whispers of their unbreakable spirit spread to other alien species. At first it was just talk, rumors that perhaps the Council wasn't as invincible as they thought. But slowly, these whispers began to grow louder, turning into something more than just idle gossip. Some species, who had long been oppressed by the Council's rule, began to see the humans not as enemies, but as allies. They saw the humans' courage, their refusal to accept defeat, and they admired it. They recognized something in humanity that they had longed for, the strength to stand up, the strength to resist. In the heart of the rebellion, human leaders began to make contact with these sympathetic alien factions. There was no formal alliance yet, just tentative discussions between leaders who understood that the Council's control over the galaxy could not last forever if they stood together. The humans offered their help, whether it was strategic advice, technological expertise, or just a chance to fight for freedom. One of the alien factions that had taken notice of the human resistance was the Thalaxians, a race known for their agility and speed, but they had been subjugated by the Council for centuries. Their people had suffered under the rule of the Council, and when they heard of the humans' rebellion, they saw an opportunity to finally break free. The Thalaxian commander, a tall, lithe alien named Ral, contacted the human leaders through a secure channel. He spoke with urgency and passion, describing the suffering of his people and the strength he saw in the human rebellion. "We've been under their control for too long," Rel said. "We have the speed, the intelligence, but we've lacked the will to fight. You humans, you have something we don't. You have the courage to never back down. We want to join you. Together, we can challenge the Council." The human leaders, initially wary of any outside interference, saw the opportunity for what it was, a chance to form a powerful alliance, one that could stand against the Council. They didn't need to be reminded of how much the Thalaxians had suffered. Their own struggle mirrored that pain. "We can fight with you," the human ambassador replied. "We don't need to do this alone. The Council has underestimated us. But if we unite, they will realize they can't control us. Not anymore." The message spread quickly through the ranks of the rebellion. The humans now had their first ally in the fight against the Council. But more were coming. The Shires, an ancient race of telepaths, also reached out. They had long been silent, observing from the shadows, but the humans' resolve had finally caught their attention. The Shires offered their ability to communicate secretly across vast distances, giving the rebellion an even greater advantage. The unexpected alliance began to grow, and with it, the power of the rebellion. The humans were no longer fighting alone. The galaxy was beginning to see that the Council's rule was not as secure as they had once thought. For Vrox, this development was a serious blow. He had assumed that the rebellion could be crushed with brute force. But now, with these new alliances, the situation had become far more complicated. His forces were spread thin, and the confidence he had once felt was slipping away. The rebellion was no longer just a fight for human survival. It had become a fight for freedom across the galaxy. The Council had underestimated the humans, and now they were about to learn that the galaxy had more than just human rebels. It had allies ready to stand beside them. The galaxy was on the brink of a new chapter. The human rebellion, once a small spark of resistance, had now become a formidable force. The unexpected alliances with the Thalaxians and the Shires had shifted the balance of power. The Intergalactic Council, which had once been confident in its control, was beginning to feel the pressure. Their overwhelming fleets, once an unstoppable force, were now spread thin and vulnerable. The humans had made it clear this was no longer just about survival. It was about taking back control. Commander Vrox stood on the command deck of his flagship, staring out at the stars. His mind raced as he prepared for the final assault on the human rebellion. He had always believed that power and strength would win wars. But these humans, they had defied everything he knew about war. They had survived, adapted, and fought back when all hope seemed lost. Now, with their new allies, they were more dangerous than ever. The Council had issued an ultimatum. The rebellion must be crushed once and for all. If the humans continued to resist, the Council would destroy them, along with anyone who dared to stand with them. Vrox knew that the stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just a battle. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy. The battle began at the edge of human space, where the Council's fleet gathered, ready to launch the final assault. Human forces, bolstered by their new allies, prepared for the inevitable clash. The rebels were outnumbered, but they had something the Council couldn't predict: their unyielding spirit and the support of those who had once lived in fear of the Council's reign. The first waves of battle began with a burst of energy, the two fleets colliding in a massive explosion of light and sound. The humans fought with everything they had, using every strategy they had learned from their previous encounters with the Council. Their ships darted through the battlefield with speed and precision, outmaneuvering the larger, slower Council vessels. Vrox, aboard his flagship, barked orders as his fleet engaged the humans. He had always been a warrior, and he knew how to win battles. But this time, something felt different. The humans weren't retreating. They weren't panicking. They fought with the kind of focus that only comes from belief, a belief that they had something worth fighting for. His ship shook as enemy fire struck the shields. Vrox gritted his teeth. "All units, maintain formation," he shouted, trying to hold control over his forces. But he knew deep down, that this wasn't just a fight for power. It was a fight for hearts and minds. The humans weren't just resisting. They were fighting for freedom. As the battle raged on, Vrox began to see cracks in the Council's dominance. The human ships, though smaller and less powerful, fought with such coordination and willpower that they started to outsmart the Council's larger, more advanced fleet. The Thalaxians darted in and out of the fray, their speed a deadly advantage, while the Shears used their telepathic abilities to communicate secretly, setting traps for the Council's forces. The Council's fleet was disoriented, and the humans took advantage. Vrox clenched his fists, realizing that this was not just another battle. It was a turning point. If the humans could hold their ground now, the galaxy would never be the same. The Council's grip on power was slipping, and the rebels were growing stronger with each passing moment. Retreat, Vrox finally ordered. It was a painful decision, but it was clear the Council's forces could not maintain their control over the battlefield. The humans had proven their strength once again. The rebellion had won a crucial victory. The Intergalactic Council, for the first time in its long history, had been forced to retreat. As the dust settled, the human forces and their allies stood tall, their victory hard-earned but well-deserved. Vrox watched from his ship, knowing that the galaxy had changed forever. The humans had shown that they would never back down, no matter the odds. And now, the galaxy had to come to terms with the fact that humanity was no longer a species to be underestimated. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the humans had made their mark on the galaxy, and they were here to stay. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy was left in shock. The Intergalactic Council had suffered a rare defeat, and the human rebellion, once thought to be a fleeting threat, had proven itself to be a force to be reckoned with. Commander Vrox, once so confident in his ability to crush the humans, now found himself on the defensive. His forces had retreated, but the damage had already been done. The rebellion had taken a huge step forward, and the Council's reputation had been severely damaged. Humanity had proven something to the galaxy, not just to the Council, but to all the species that had witnessed their fight. They had shown that resistance was not just possible, but it could succeed. The humans didn't need the strongest weapons or the largest fleets. They only needed their unyielding spirit and the will to fight for what they believed in. As the humans celebrated their victory, they also knew the war was far from over. They had won a battle, not the war. The Council would not give up so easily. But something had shifted in the galaxy. The humans had not just survived. They had shown that they could lead. They had inspired others, and now many alien species were beginning to reconsider their loyalties to the Council. Some even began to openly question whether the Council's way of rule was truly the best for the galaxy. The rebellion's message of freedom and defiance spread like wildfire. The news of their victory reached the farthest corners of space, sparking hope in the hearts of those who had long been oppressed by the Council's iron grip. Alien factions that had once been afraid to speak out began to rally behind the humans. The Thalaxians and Shires, who had already allied with the humans, were joined by other species who had lived under the Council's rule for centuries. The galaxy was beginning to change. Vrox stood in his quarters, staring out at the stars. He was no longer the confident commander he once was. The humans had shaken him to his core. He had underestimated them, and now he understood just how dangerous they truly were. It wasn't their technology that made them powerful. It was their refusal to surrender. No matter how many times they were beaten, no matter how many losses they suffered, they kept fighting. That was what made them different from every other species in the galaxy. His officers had been defeated in battle, but Vrox was not ready to give up. The humans had forced him to think differently, and now he had to adapt. He couldn't simply crush them with force. He had to find a way to break their spirit, to make them understand that their fight was futile. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. As he sat in the silence of his command center, Vrox came to a difficult realization. The war had changed. The humans had shown the galaxy that there was more to power than just force and strength. There was something far more powerful, something that had the potential to unite the galaxy in a way the Council never could. The humans had brought that power to the forefront. For the first time, Vrox wondered if the galaxy would ever be the same. The Council's reign was not as secure as it once had been, and in the coming days, it became clear that the rebellion had not just won a battle, they had won the hearts and minds of the galaxy. The tide had turned, and the Council would have to reckon with the humans' refusal to give up. The fight was far from over, but the humans had shown that they could change the course of history.